The red dust of Mars was still. Soldiers stood in a straight line. Their black uniforms shone under the soft light of twin moons. In front of them was a coffin made of earth steel, covered by a folded flag. They had come to say goodbye. General Kael was dead. He was a war hero, a man who saved Earth's colonies during the Battle of Titan. He fought when others ran. He bled when others hid. Now he lay still, silent, far from home. Lieutenant Mira Lane stood at the front, holding the folded flag and shaking hands. Her eyes were wet, but she held back her tears. In the Martian wind, nothing moved. Even the wind respected the dead today. A group of civilians stood behind the soldiers. Some were family, others were survivors. All had come to show respect. The sound of the bugle began to play. It echoed across the red desert. Slowly, the coffin was lowered into the grave. The silence was deep, pure, painful until it was broken. Voice buzzed through the communication channel. Cold, sharp. They cry over dead meat. How weak everyone froze. Mira blinked, confused. What was that? The tech officer near the comm tower looked pale. That wasn't us. That was from space, a Trinari broadcast. Then came laughter, not human laughter, alien laughter, cruel, echoing loud. It came from the Trinari warship floating above Mars' orbit. They had tapped into Earth's funeral frequency. They were watching, listening, mocking. This is how humans waste time, said another alien voice. Burying bones like animals, so emotional, so useless. Soldiers clenched their fists. One of them whispered, "Those monsters." A younger soldier, barely 20, shouted, "Give me a gun. I'll show them how we bury enemies." But Mira didn't move. She looked at the coffin, then at the sky. Her voice was calm but cold. "Cut the feet. Let them laugh, but don't forget this day." The funeral continued in silence, but the pain had changed. The tears now burned with anger. The Trinari had spit on a sacred moment. Later, that night, Mira sat in the base briefing room, staring at the playback. The alien voices laughed again and again. The Trinari didn't just attack with weapons, they attacked with words. The room was dark. Only the screen glowed. A young cadet entered. "We have more, Lieutenant," one of their bars. On Trina Prime, they played the funeral on a public screen. Aliens were drinking, laughing, pointing at our soldiers. Mira's jaw tightened. They turned a funeral into a joke. "But," the cadet added, "there was one who didn't laugh." She turned. "What?" The cadet tapped on the screen. "This one. Back of the room." He didn't speak, didn't drink, just watched. The image zoomed in. A Trinari soldier with gray-blue skin and tired eyes sat alone in the shadows. His face showed no smile. His hands were folded in his lap, and when the bugle played, his head bowed slightly. Mira stared. Strange, the cadet nodded. He wasn't like the others. "Record everything," she ordered, "every movement, every signal. I want to know if that Trinari appears again." As the cadet left, Mira stood up and walked to the window above her. The sky sparkled with stars, but all she saw was the shape of the Trinari ship still floating in orbit. Watching, waiting, she whispered, "You laughed at us when we cried. But what do you do when your people die? Or do your dead mean nothing to you?" The next day, Earth's High Council met in secret. The footage was shown. The laughter echoed through the hall. Anger filled every face. "We must respond," said one general. "Not with words, but with weapons." "They insulted our honor," said another. "No species with any respect would behave like this." But Mira stood up and asked a different question. "What if they don't understand death the way we do?" The room quieted. She continued, "We've studied their weapons, their ships, their biology, but never their grief, never their rituals." One officer laughed bitterly. "Because they have none." Mira shook her head. Then why did one of them bow his head? Why didn't he laugh? They had no answers. That night, Mira sat alone, replaying the funeral again. The Trinari voices still rang in her ears, but one face to one who didn't laugh stayed in her mind. She didn't know his name, she didn't know his rank, but something told her. He knew pain too, though the mood on Earth was changing. The video of the Trinari laughing during General Kael's funeral had already gone viral. News channels played it on repeat. Social media burned with rage. Millions of humans, across colonies and star stations, felt the same cold fury. They mocked our hero. They insulted our dead. People didn't want answers, they wanted revenge. At Earth Defense Command, the council gathered in full uniform. Everyone sat around the long glass table, and the screen showed the video once again. Laughter, alien voices, mockery, a sacred ritual turned into a joke. General Voss slammed his fist on the table. "Enough. We have satellites. We have fleets. Let's use them." Another council member added, "One strike. Let them know Earth doesn't forget." But Lieutenant Mira Lane sat quietly. She wasn't the highest rank in the room, but she was the only one who had stood next to Kael's coffin, the only one who saw that moment through her own eyes. "We need to think," she said calmly. General Voss scoffed. "Think, while they laugh at us." Mira raised her hand. "I'm not saying we forgive. I'm saying, what if not all of them? We're laughing." The screen changed. Mira had zoomed in on the quiet Trinari soldier. The one sitting alone at the bar, his head slightly lowered, his hands folded, his face serious, almost sad. This one didn't laugh, she said. He bowed his head when the funeral bugle played. One general frowned. So what? One didn't laugh while the rest cheered. But why? Mira asked. That's what I want to know. There was silence for a moment. Then a voice from the corner spoke. It was Dr. Yael Roth, a cultural analyst who had studied alien species for years. I've read some fragments, he said. Old Trinari texts. Ancient, hidden stuff. Their people once had mourning rituals. Sacred ones, but something changed. The room turned toward him. What do you mean? Dr. Roth opened a file. Trinari leaders believed public grief made them weak. They banned all forms of mourning. Funerals were removed from history. Even speaking of the dead became shameful. Mira leaned forward. So, they don't laugh because they're cruel. They laugh because they're not allowed to cry. Dr. Roth nodded. It's possible their society rewards control. Emotion is seen as failure. The room grew tense. One council member asked, then why mock us? Because, Roth said, mocking others hides their own pain. Mira stood slowly. We reacted with rage, but maybe they reacted with fear. General Voss wasn't convinced. Even if that's true, we can't ignore what they did. This wasn't a private insult. They broadcasted it. They wanted us to feel weak. Mira stayed quiet. Her thoughts were elsewhere. She kept thinking about the silent soldier, the one Trinari who didn't join in. Something about him felt different later. That night, Mira returned to the communications lab. She reviewed the footage again, frame by frame. The laughing aliens, the drinks, the loud cheers, and then the silent one. She paused the image, zoomed in closer. On his arm was a strange mark, a symbol half covered by his armor. She ran it through. Translation software result unknown, possibly religious or ritual-based. She looked up at the sky through the observation dome. Somewhere out there, that soldier still lived, and maybe he carried a secret. Just then an alert flashed across the room. Unidentified Trinari transmission detected encrypted. Location, Dead Zone, Sector 4. The same region where Earth's border patrol had vanished a month ago. Mira narrowed her eyes. Trace that signal and prepare a ship. The technician looked confused. Ma'am, what's in the Dead Zone? She replied quietly. Maybe something they didn't want us to find. The sky over Dead Zone Sector 4 was pitch black. No stars, no moons, no light. It was the place where satellites failed. Ships went silent and no one dared to go without orders. A month ago, Earth had lost contact with Patrol Unit 12 here. Everyone believed the crew was dead. Now, Lieutenant Mira Lane's ship floated silently into the dark sector. Her team was small, just 5 trusted people. No warships, no heavy weapons, just a scanner, a translator, and courage. Status? Mira asked quietly. Scanner's glitching again, said Corporal Tenney. The same static as before. It's like something is jamming us. The pilot. Diaz has adjusted course. I don't like this place. Feels like space itself is watching us. Suddenly, the ship jolted. Contact. Tenney shouted. A shape appeared outside the window, huge, silent, floating like a dead whale in space. It was a Trinari ship. Od, broken, covered in scars, no power signature. Diaz said, she's dead. Take us in, Mira ordered. The docking was rough, but they made it. The Trinari ship groaned as if it was breathing its last breath. Inside, everything was dark. Dust floated in the air. Walls were cracked, lights flickered, no sound, no life. Until they reached a door sealed tight, glowing with soft blue symbols. What is this place? Whispered Tenney. Mira stepped forward. She touched the panel. The door hissed open. Behind it was a room none of them expected. Rows and rows of bodies, not thrown, not burned, not crushed, laid carefully on long stone platforms. Each body wore armor. Each one had a symbol carved beside it. There were over 30 Trinari warriors, resting in silence. A soft blue flame flickered in the center of the room. This is a burial chamber, Mira said, stunned. But I thought Trinari don't bury their dead, said Diaz. They don't, Mira whispered. Not anymore. She walked closer. On the wall was a large symbol, the same one she had seen on the arm of the silent Trinari soldier from the bar. What's that? Tenney asked. Mira translated it slowly. It means, return to the flame. One of the bodies was smaller, wearing different armor like a scout or messenger. Clutched in its hand was a small cube. Mira gently took it. As soon as it touched her skin, it glowed and played a message. A voice spoke in Trinari, but it was translated instantly. If you find this, then you have found our secret. We do grieve, we do mourn, but only in silence, only in hiding. Because to show pain is to show weakness. That is our law. That is our curse. The voice paused. You bury your dead with tears. We bury ours with fear. Then the message ended. The team stood in silence. They had discovered something powerful. Something forbidden. The Trinari did mourn, but only in secret. Only in places like this. Tenney broke the silence. We need to report this to command. Mira shook her head. No, not yet. Why not? She looked around at the resting warriors. Because if the Trinari find out we saw this, they might think we dishonored it. And if they believe that, they'll come for blood. Diaz finished. They turned to leave, but just as the door began to close, Mira stopped. On the far wall was a drawing. A human and a Trinari standing side by side, both holding fire. It looked old, hand-carved, as if someone had once hoped for peace. Mira touched it and whispered, "What happened to your hope?" The message Mira found in the burial ship changed everything. When Earth Command received the report, they didn't believe it. The Trinari had always claimed they felt no sorrow. They taught their children not to cry. They punished weakness. But now, Mira had found proof that grief still lived in them, buried deep and hidden from their own people. Within hours, Trinari Command sent a message, not a warning, not a threat, but an invitation. "You have seen what was forbidden. Now you must understand it fully. Come witness what we hide." Mira stood in the command room, staring at the transmission. It had no signature, no name, just a set of coordinates far outside Earth's space on a cold, forgotten moon covered in ash. General Voss called it a trap, but Mira felt something else. "If they wanted to kill us," she said, "they would have done it already." The council voted. Barely permission was granted. Mira's ship left Earth with a small, unarmed crew. They followed the signal into the dark, past colonies, past war zones, past the edge of known space, and finally, they arrived. The moon below was gray and lifeless. No cities, no lights, just rock and wind. But in one massive crater sat a circle of standing black stones, each one shaped like a tall blade. They were ancient, and at the center of the circle, a low blue fire flickered, just like the one Mira saw in the burial chamber. As they landed, a Trinari transport arrived silently. It hovered, then settled across the crater. No weapons showed, no guards, just one tall figure walking toward them. It was the same Trinari soldier Mira had seen in the bar recording, the one who hadn't laughed. He stopped a few feet from her. They looked at each other. Mira broke the silence. "You remember the funeral, don't you?" The alien nodded. "We saw you didn't laugh." Still no words. He turned and motioned for them to follow. One by one, Mira and her team stepped into the circle. The moment they crossed the boundary, everything changed. The wind stopped, the noise faded, and the silence felt. Wholly inside the circle, the Trinari fell to their knees, dozens of them, all in black armor. None spoke, none moved. Some held blades. Others carried small glowing stones in their hands. Mira looked around, unsure what to do. The tall Trinari finally spoke. His voice was deep but soft. "Our law forbids public grief, but we do not forget." He pointed to the fire. "This flame remembers for us every warrior who dies. Their name is whispered into the fire. Their strength becomes part of the circle." Another Trinari stood. She carried a mask, painted with symbols. She walked to the center of the circle and began to sing, but it wasn't a loud song. It was more like a whisper, a song of sorrow, in a language Mira didn't know, but still somehow understood. Loss, memory, pain that has no place to live. One by one, the Trinari placed their stones into the fire. Each time they did, the flame changed color: blue to white, white to red, red to gold. The wind picked up again, but only inside the circle. Then came the final moment. The tall Trinari, the one Mira had watched for so long, stepped forward. He removed his helmet. His face was covered in scars, not from war, but from burns, as if he had been punished before, for something forbidden. He knelt by the flame and he spoke a name, a single name that made Mira's eyes widen. Kael. Her voice broke. "You knew him." The Trinari nodded slowly. "He spared me once. I returned the favor. Then he died. I was not allowed to mourn, until now." Mira knelt beside him. Two enemies, two soldiers, one flame. She reached into her coat and pulled out a small badge, General Kael's rank pin. She placed it beside the flame. It glowed bright for a moment, then faded. Silence followed. No one moved. No one spoke. For the first time in known history, a human and a Trinari mourned together, not as enemies but as survivors. The blue flame was still burning. Mira stayed kneeling beside it, the Trinari warrior still beside her. Neither spoke. Around them, the other Trinari soldiers stood silently, like statues made of stone in sorrow. And then it happened. A tear, single tear rolled down the Trinari's face. It glowed faintly in the firelight, slow, quiet, heavy. Mira almost didn't believe it. She had never seen an alien cry. Trinari were known for being emotionless, heartless, cold. But now, here he was, not just remembering General Kael, but truly mourning him. "You cry," she whispered. The warrior didn't answer at first. Then, he said, "I must not. It is against the code." He stood slowly and pulled his hood over his face, hiding the tear. "The priests will punish me." Mira's eyes narrowed for one tear. He looked at her. "For weakness." She stood beside him. "That's not weakness. That's strength." He didn't reply. One of the older Trinari walked forward. His armor was covered in gold lines. He was clearly a high-ranking figure, a priest. His face was hidden behind a black mask. He broke the silence. The priest said, "You let the enemy see your grief." The warrior stood tall. "She saw my honor." The priest raised a small metal object, sharp and cold. Mira stepped between them. "He did nothing wrong." The priest looked at her. "You are not of our kind. You cannot speak for him. You showed me your truth," he said. "You all mourn. You all feel pain. You just hide it behind laws." The priest's voice grew colder. "The law keeps us strong." Mira pointed to the flame. No, the flame does. The memories do. The grief does. You're only strong because you remember the fallen, not because you hide them. There was silence. The other Trinari looked at one another, uncertain. The priest slowly lowered the blade. "He will not be punished today," the priest said, "but he must leave the order." The warrior nodded. "Then I leave." Gasps rose from the others. "You give up your name," the priest warned, "your title, your future." "I have already given it," the warrior replied, his voice calm. "When I cried for a friend." Mira watched as the warrior walked away from the circle. Alone, his own people stepped back to let him pass before he left. He turned to Mira and said quietly, "The name you saw in the burial ship returned to the flame. That is our oldest belief, the first belief, but it was banned long ago." "Why?" Mira asked. "Because it taught that all life has meaning," he said, "even enemy life." He placed something in her hand. It was a tiny crystal inside. She saw a memory. Kael, smiling, laughing, sharing food with the Trinari, this very warrior, in a damaged outpost on Titan during the last ceasefire. A moment of peace, never reported, never remembered. Until now. Mira's hands shook. "Why give me this?" He looked away. "Because you remembered him." Then he vanished into the shadows beyond the crater. Later, back on her ship, Mira sat alone in her cabin. She held the crystal tightly. That she had come expecting anger. She had found pain. She had thought Trinari were monsters. But one had risked his life to mourn a human. She uploaded the crystal to Earth Command, not to start a war, but to stop one. The crystal Mira brought home changed everything. Inside that small glowing shard was a forgotten truth, a memory between enemies, never seen before. A secret moment between General Kael and a Trinari warrior, once hidden in silence, now shining for all to witness. When Earth's High Command saw the memory, they were shocked. Some believed it was fake, others stayed quiet, but many wept. Kael had not just fought the enemy, he had shared food with one, laughed with one, trusted one, in the Trinari, the very ones who had mocked Earth's funeral, had mourned him in secret. Now, that secret was exposed. A new vote was called. Some wanted war, but most wanted truth. And so Earth made a bold offer. A message was sent across stars, a signal of peace. "You honored our dead in silence, now let us honor yours together." At first, the Trinari did not respond, but then they came. Not with weapons, not with warships, but with silence. On a cold hill near Earth's moonbase 7, a new monument was built. It was simple. One half was carved with human names, soldiers, pilots, explorers. The other half carried names, in glowing alien script, warriors who had died with no voice, no flame, no public grief. The blue fire burned at the center, just like it had in the crater. On the day of the memorial, Mira stood in uniform, holding General Kael's rank pin in her hand. The flame flickered beside her. Around her stood hundreds of humans, and across from them stood Trinari warriors. They didn't speak, they didn't bow, but they placed stones around the fire. Each stone marked with a name, the same blue stones Mira had seen in the hidden burial room. Mira stepped forward and placed Kael's pin on the earth side of the monument. She looked across the flame and saw him, the same Trinari who had cried. He wore no armor now, no rank, no title, but he stood taller than anyone. Their eyes met. No words were spoken, but they both understood. This wasn't just a funeral, it was a beginning. Two species who once hated each other now stood around one fire, not as enemies, not as strangers, but as survivors of pain, as keepers of memory. The wind carried no music, no songs, just the quiet crackle of the flame, and in that silence, the first stone cracked open, revealing a glowing symbol inside. The same symbol carved, long ago, returned to the flame, later. The moment was broadcast across both worlds. Humans saw Trinari warriors kneel beside their fallen Trinari, saw human children light candles for alien names they could not pronounce. A reporter called it the day the silence ended, but Mira knew better. The silence hadn't ended, it had simply been shared. Back at the memorial, two flags now stood side by side, one Earth flag, one Trinari banner, both waving in the wind, both telling the same story. Grief is not weakness, memory is, not shame. And peace sometimes begins with a funeral.